Welcome back. Day 2 here of our daily show here at the running event. My name is Dylan Bowman, of course, from Free Trail. Our coverage here this week is brought to you by BOA Technologies. A big thank you to BOA for all of their support. And joining us first today, the brand new president of the Americas for Salomon, Mr. Steve Doolan. Steve, good morning to you.
Good morning, and thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for coming over.
My pleasure.
How many TREs have you been to at this point?
It's a great question. I was actually thinking about it a little bit earlier. I'm going to say 13. I think that's probably, it might be 12. I don't think it's 14.
Yeah.
So certainly more than 10.
This is my first time, and you can already sense why it's become such a phenomenon in our industry. So
it's amazing. I mean, the first one I went to was probably in 2008, and it was actually in Dallas. And I just think about, the intent there actually, and the intent here today really has not changed too much. The audience and maybe the impact of running has changed substantially, in terms of how it's not just perceived, but really, I think, used in terms of running as a piece of an everyday life for a whole lot of different people in a whole lot of different ways. And the show has become increasingly relevant, which is interesting when you think about what's happened with a number of the other trade shows that existed, right? In 2008, there would have been Interbike, SIA, Outdoor Retailer a couple times a year. And today, this is really the preeminent show within sort of the outdoor running trail space, which is cool.
That's so interesting. Why do you think that is? Is it just because running is such a cultural and community-oriented thing?
I think that is definitely a component of it. I think what the organizers of the running event did better than anybody, and they've continued to do, is while they've certainly brought other brands and a broader cross-section of retailers in, they have really stayed focused on a singular consumer that they want to serve, which is ultimately a runner. Yeah. And there's adjacencies that sit with that. But ultimately, I think remaining focused and having a singularity, if you will, makes it easier to tell a message and to bring people in around something. I think that's maybe what you could say some of the other shows struggled with in some ways.
Yeah, just too broad. Cool. Well, let's speak more specifically about you and your career. You're obviously brand new to the role here, president of the Americas at Salomon after a long run at HOKA. What excited you about the new opportunity, and how's the first few weeks been, I guess?
I've felt incredibly welcomed. It feels incredibly natural, which is I'm grateful for. I think maybe first and foremost. I was incredibly fortunate just to be in the right place at the right time in 2010 with HOKA, and had an incredible ride with amazing people. And I think that was really the piece that was the hardest to leave, was the teams and ultimately the individuals that made up those teams. But in Salomon was an opportunity to come back to what I would describe as probably my first love, which was skiing. I was actually born in France. I spent 8 years living in a town called Grenoble in the Alps as a kid. And my first memories as a human are, my mom teaching me how to ski it's not a resort. I don't even know if it's a ski area. It's 3 pommel lifts called Le Seppé and the Chartreuse. So skiing has been a huge part of my life, and Salomon as a byproduct I've been aware of it. Whether it's, rear entry ski boots in the 80s, or, you think about a Pocket Rocket or a 1080, an Extreme Series ski. And obviously then being aware of the footwear coming in the market as a byproduct of that closeness to the brand and being in the ski industry. There were all of these connectivities consistently, really throughout my life. And so when this conversation started, it initially it was just sort of I'm open to a conversation, and it became very real very quickly. And so from a rational standpoint, that really was, there's all of these components that are real drivers, and exciting for me.
So interesting. Now, just remembering too, HOKA was born in France and now, based here in North America.
Yeah.
Obviously, Salomon's still based there in Annecy, but you're going to be in charge of the American operation. Not knowing that you were born in France yourself, it all makes perfect sense.
There's a whole lot of very cool links, no doubt.
Yeah. So obviously, you mentioned the ski industry. Salomon has been a huge pioneer in both skiing and trail running. Obviously, we focus predominantly on trail running, which is a massively important category for you guys as well. And Salomon has been such an important brand in the sport, really, in this last 20-year rocket ship growth momentum that we've experienced. But now, here at TRE, at all the events, all the big brands are in the space. So I'd love to hear you talk about how you maintain that leadership and pioneering position in the category as all the big brands are coming into.
Yeah, I think in some ways we can overcomplicate it. It really comes back to as simple as it sounds. You've got to have relevant product. And one of the, if as I was sort of going through the process of like, hey, what are the reasons that I would join Salomon? I actually had the opportunity to be in the ADC, the NC Design Center, which is sort of like the hub, the heart, the brains, if you will, of Salomon. 12 or 13 years ago, as part of actually a ski piece or ski trip, and with a number of retailers. And I can vividly remember walking through the back and seeing the machinery that existed in that space and the industrial background and the desire to really find solutions and make solutions that were best for the individuals. And then walking through the soft good area where they had lasts and they had sewing machines and the ability to literally build shoes and apparel right there. There was a real belief and understanding from my side of Salomon's desire to continue to serve a number of different athletes in a number of their different pursuits. And the baseline for me is I love gear. I think maybe probably a skiing influence, having spent a lot of time cycling. And then, with HOKA, certainly the equipment that makes a difference is the one that you become emotionally tied to. And I fully believe that Salomon is or does have an emotional connection to a whole lot of the individuals that are its consumers. And I think we can continue to like really forge ahead in that regards. All the assets are there. We just got to make sure that we listen to what consumers are asking for, understand why that is, and provide them the best possible solutions.
Make good product. Coming back to the French to America conversation, I'm sure the listeners would be interested to hear you talk about how that works practically. Obviously, again, the brand is based there in Annecy. You're going to be sort of the head of the operation here in what I'm sure is a really important market. How does that work? How does the communication evolve? How do you set priorities together?
I'm figuring it out.
Yeah, it's new.
It's probably the first piece. I think, one of the things that became, I think, really evident to all of us over the course of the last 4 years is, listen, you can get a lot done virtually, right? Like two-dimensionally on a screen. But being in person is much, much, much more powerful. And so as I think about that, it's how do we really build, not just bridges, but like portals that we move people, personality, information, insights through on a consistent basis. And that's going to be a component of, the teams in Europe. I mean, there's 6 individuals from the footwear team, 3 from trail, 3 from road that are here at the show today, and they're committed to understanding what the U.S. market needs. And then if we think about the team, with a product or merchandising focus that exists in the Americas, if I'm doing my math right, I think there's 9 or 10 individuals. And so they are sort of, if you will, the voice of this market. And so they work with, the commercial teams, the sales teams, they work with consumer insights groups, they work with retailers, and they're really helping package that information, then feed it into the product teams. And really it's about building this really easy flow of information. Mm-hmm. And so for me, that's the baseline. And from there, hopefully we go and build really relevant product.
Awesome.
But yeah, it's, listen, the U.S. market is one of 2 key focal geographic areas for Salomon. And so we have a responsibility to support the teams in NC, and NC has a responsibility to sort of vice versa. It's very much a yin and yang.
Coming back to the competitive landscape, it reminds me of something that we've sort of talked about as a team, and that has been in the back of my mind here in the last couple of days at TRE, is just like the difficulty of being authentic in a new market. So a lot of these big brands who come from road marathons and sort of the performance element of running, I think have a harder time than they expect translating into a trail community. And if I think about it, Salomon has actually done a decent job of doing the opposite, coming from a trail DNA and making good road product. Is there anything you want to say about that, about like moving into adjacent markets and maintaining authenticity?
Yeah, I think authenticity, maybe as the first topic, really comes from recognizing where it is that you came from, maybe first and foremost, and being true to where it is that you want to go. So that's sort of a high level or maybe a thesis statement. And then for us at Salomon, and if I think about like the individuals that I've met, whether it's here in the US or certainly in NC, there is a real consistency in the desire or the connectivity to each of the things that they're doing. And so that could be somebody that's working on the protectives in the winter sports side, or to make a better split board for snowboarding or for an alpine race ski. And that applies for the individuals that, developed our most recent hydration packs or, products like the new Genesis. There's a real desire to understand what the needs are and serve those. And I think if you stay focused on those pieces, you do remain authentic.
Yeah. So I'd love to talk about three things, just briefly on each, probably, where I've recognized that Salomon has just been so important in my history in the sport. Athletes, events, and media, right? The initial Salomon running TV 15 years ago was just like the thing that got thousands of people hooked on the sport. Now, the Golden Trail World Series is, I think, the preeminent race series in the world, certainly the most competitive, some of the best, again, media and storytelling around it. And also athletes. I think Salomon's shown over the years the best capability of identifying the best athletes in the world at a moment when they're sort of undiscovered. So maybe let's start with the Golden Trail World Series. Anything that you can share about, what that's going to look like next year and into the future and what role it plays for the brand?
Yeah, I think it continues to play the role that it's played. I mean, it is ultimately, I think the baseline is it's a community that we want to serve. And when I say serve, it's where is it that they want to be and showing up there with them and ultimately like supporting them in those environments, in those personal challenges that they're going through. Personal feats maybe is a better way to describe it. And so that connectivity I think is key. So it's showing up, being present, and really connecting with the audience that's there and present. And then I think we've seen, and you would have seen this really closely over the last 15 years, like that the ability to actually wrap your head around running 100 miles seemed incredibly daunting to, I think, much more people 5 or 10 or 15 years ago. And today actually seems like something that's much more attainable. And to me, if we're Salomon, we should be a component of like those gateways, right? Like it's, hey, go and do, 15K or 30K or 50K. And so you can build pretty consistently and all of a sudden it doesn't seem all that daunting. So for me, it's allowing people the opportunity to discover what it is that they're able to do and supporting them through that process.
That's why I think it's so brilliant, is because there's so many more people who would sign up for a 20K, a 30K, maybe up to a trail marathon, but who are not interested in running hard rock or UTMB or something. And so kind of focusing on that sub-ultra distance space speaks to that audience and provides a really compelling viewing experience for those of us who are diehard trail running fans and,
totally.
Of the ultra persuasion too. So then maybe we could package the media and athlete component together, say whatever you want to about that. Obviously Courtney Dauwalter is sort of one of the few people who's ever like transcended our sport. And similarly, like with the Golden Trail World Series and a lot of the storytelling that Salomon does, I think it represents the sport in a really positive way. So anything you want to add about that stuff?
Yeah, and speaking to Courtney specifically, I had the privilege of being both at Western States and at UTMB to see her come across the finish line of both of those events. I'm getting chills just like thinking about it. Will that feat ever be repeated? I would bet against it in my lifetime. It is truly incredible. And I think that speaks again to a number of different pieces. Like one is if I think about the individuals that are like in NC that are thinking about, hey, what is it that Courtney needs to go and achieve these? One example is obviously the short knee, right? Like here's this like very clear silhouette that is like hers and like really bringing that to the masses, if you will. And then there's, whether it's footwear or it's socks or it's, hydration vest, and really, hey, how do you serve that individual? And then ultimately like, hey, how do we take those learnings and bring those out? So I think that to me is where athletes, they inspire and they also provide significant learnings in terms of what that product development piece is. And then, when we think about like media today, I was having an interesting conversation with a friend of mine on Monday night. So a couple nights ago, just about, what does the shape of media or content look like? And, if you go like on a TikTok, there's like this original UGC that has millions or tens of millions of followers. And I think as I think about media or content creation is how do we intersect with that in a way that is real? Like, hey, clearly we're like looking to present a thing to these audiences, but at the same time not come across as like cheesy. I think that's one of the things as I think about media and how it continues to evolve. What is the hook? What is valuable? How do you stay true to the brand? How do you allow a content creator to be true to themselves and at the same time allow for an intersection that, being honest, there's a commercial component too, which is, I don't know, interesting piece. And what we came away from that conversation is we do not have the answer. This individual is lives in the media space as a publisher, and I'm really curious to see how that develops here over the next few years.
As somebody who also lives in the media space, I don't think there's ever a moment where you can actually put your finger on it. It's always moving so fast and evolving.
Yep.
I guess this is probably a fun time to move to the lifestyle element. This is something that I was really excited to talk to you about. You're wearing a pair of the XTs right now, a shoe that won UTMB back in 2008 and now has won the sneaker of the year. I think it was back in 2019. It won GQ sneaker of the year. Famously, Rihanna was wearing Salomon's on stage at the Super Bowl this past year. I mean, just talk about, how important is that to the business at this point?
Important.
Okay.
I think one of the things that's interesting to me is when you look at, I'll use sort of an example. I think about my dad going to work 30 years ago, right? Maybe 35 years ago. Every single day he wore dress shoes and a suit and a tie. And I don't know that I've seen a tie in the convention center. I don't think there might be a couple of sport coats. And granted, this is the running event, they're sneakers. But if you just look at sneakers and how they've pervaded culture, or what you might call the casualization of culture. Listen, it is a component of the business that we're absolutely going to go after. One of the things I'm fascinated by is the silhouettes that really work and are timeless are ones that, and you can look at any of the big brands, Nike, Adi, Puma, certainly Salomon. They're products that at one point were driven by the desire to be the best in class. Think about a Chuck Taylor. So that to me is really interesting. And we clearly have a couple of silhouettes, an XT4 and an XT6, that have really resonated. It's certainly an area that we're intent on bringing Salomon to a bigger audience. In the U.S., Salomon is known by about 2% of the population. What's interesting to me is
really, what a huge opportunity.
Exactly. Yeah. The equity that the Salomon brand has, though, is very real. And so for me, it's about, hey, how do we, those that are knowledgeable, share this affinity that we have for this amazing brand?
Final couple questions here then. Obviously, we are here at TRE. You're sort of brand new in the role. What are your priorities over the next couple of days, and where can people maybe find you out on the floor?
I'll be at the Salomon booth for sure. I'm learning. Every day I'm there's a lot more I don't know. That's becoming clearer. But no, I think for me, it's really just trying to understand really clearly what are the strengths of the brand, and then maybe more importantly, hey, what are the areas that we really need to dig into? And it could be everything from how it is that we interact and work with retailers to ultimately present the brand. I think of, retailers or wholesale partners as access points. They're places where a consumer, an individual that's passionate about any number of different things can experience a brand. So we have to make sure that we're providing the best expression of Salomon in each of those environments. I think just that's one piece. And then, really just spending time with the product team that's here from France, hearing what they're thinking about, what the insights are that they're garnering, certainly feeding them some of the things that I've learned over the years, and making sure that as we think about the marketplace here, obviously we're selling in fall 24 today. Spring 25, trying to get my seasons right, is not all that far away. Product development is well into development. So just making sure that we're going to serve consumers with the product they need. You brought a product here with us. What do you want to tell us about this? We've got a rabid audience of gearheads here that are trail oriented. So what'd you bring? So we obviously have Genesis S Pros out in the market today. And we bring this Genesis version here on 2/1. So February 1st. So about 2 months out. So really taking some of the key cues and learnings that we had from that Genesis S Lab, the Pro version. So one of the things that we know is as people run, your movement patterns. Pick it up for the camera. Yeah. As you move through the biomechanical components or your movement patterns, you definitely change. You become more tired, and support comes from medial and lateral posts or building in the piece. One of the things that I love is Matrix is an incredible material, hydrophobic, really comfortable, wears incredibly well, incredibly durable. And yeah, it's just a shoe that was originally actually built for athletes in sort of the heart of COVID to be able to go and do like FKT projects, that has become adopted across the board. Courtney ran all 3 races in this shoe.
So that's the new version of the shoe that Courtney was wearing last year.
Yeah, so this is actually a slightly more accessible from a price point standpoint. A couple different components in terms of like how the midsole is built. Get into the marketplace at $160, a little bit more accessible price wise as well.
Sweet. Well, if it's good enough for Courtney, it's good enough for anybody, I think.
Certainly for me.
Steve Doolan, thanks for coming on the show. Good luck settling into the new role.
Thank you so much. Great to be here with y'all.